Before we begin, take a breath. This isn't just a podcast, Steve. It's a new way to think, speak, and live in English. Welcome to Confluent Podcast, where words flow, confidence grows, and every sip brings you closer to fluency. So I want you to picture something with me for a second.
Okay, ready?
Imagine a live broadcast, right? We've got this really prominent English teacher on the air, and he's parsing through some incredibly advanced English vocabulary, touching on these really deep philosophical concepts.
Sounds pretty standard for a high-level lesson.
Right, but here's the catch. He is whispering, like he is absolutely terrified to make a sound.
Oh, wow. Why?
Because sleeping soundly, right on his chest, is his newborn twin baby girl.
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah, and if she wakes up, the broadcast is totally over. So today, we are doing a deep dive into exactly what he's whispering about in this really high-stakes, intimate moment.
That is just such an incredible visual.
Right. And we're going to explore how his radical approach totally dismantles the traditional and frankly pretty miserable methods of language learning.
I mean, it's really the ultimate visual metaphor for what he's teaching, if you think about it.
Oh, totally.
Like, here is a guy who is flat out refusing to use some sterile, noisy classroom environment. He's operating entirely in the real world.
Yeah, he's relying on actual context.
Exactly. He isn't standing there teaching lists of verbs for you to memorize. Instead, he's analyzing this recorded interview he did with a spiritual thinker named Acharya Ji.
And he anchors this entire lesson around a single, really highly charged question submitted by a viewer named Jose.
Right, and it was a pretty intense question, wasn't
It
it?
was. Jose basically asked, does meditation put you in jeopardy of being influenced by evil spirits?
Which is such a wild thing to bring up in an English lesson.
I know. But that word right there, jeopardy, meaning danger, it becomes the absolute linchpin of the broadcast.
And notice how he teaches it. He doesn't just write, jeopardy equals danger on a whiteboard and move on.
Right. No rote memorization.
Exactly. He validates the question first by teaching the word legitimate. He tells his audience that Jose's fear is a legitimate, reasonable thing to ask.
But then he kind of flips it, right?
He does. He
Right.
pivots and calls the fear itself a myth. So he explains that a myth is this widespread belief that is ultimately totally false.
And the way he teaches these three words, jeopardy, legitimate, and myth, it's just fascinating. He uses this technique that he calls circling.
Right, circling. It's a really powerful tool.
Yeah, because he doesn't just state the definitions once. He constantly repeats the words. But he asks the audience questions from, like, a million different angles.
Yeah, he'll say things like, is it a myth or is it true?
Exactly. Or, who said it was a myth?
Was the question legitimate or was the fear of jeopardy illegitimate?
Right, so he's constantly twisting it around.
Yeah.
And to understand why this works so well, I think we have to look at the cognitive psychology behind memory.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, think about traditional flashcard memorization.
Ugh, the worst.
Right. It relies purely on repetition. And sure, that engages the surface levels of the brain, but it completely lacks any real emotional resonance.
There's no hook.
Exactly, no hook. But what this teacher is doing with circling, it taps into something way deeper.
Because he's embedding the vocabulary inside this controversial debate.
Yes, a slightly spooky debate about evil spirits, no less. And by doing that, he lowers what linguists call the affective filter.
Meaning basically that the listener's brain stops feeling like it's taking a stressful test.
Spot on. It starts feeling like it's just listening to a story.
And the brain always prioritizes information that has narrative context, right?
Always. You aren't just trying to remember a random sequence of letters anymore. You are tracking the outcome of a debate.
So the vocabulary just becomes the tool you need to understand the story.
It is context-dependent memory in action. It's brilliant.
And the context gets even richer when he addresses why people actually believe this myth in the first place.
Oh, the blank slate concept.
Yeah. He explains that a lot of people mistakenly think meditation is about achieving a blank slate.
Right. They think you have to empty your mind entirely.
Exactly, becoming this vulnerable, open vessel.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why they fear evil spirits might, pour in and put them in jeopardy.
But according to his analysis of that interview with Acharya Ji, that is a profound misunderstanding of meditation.
How so?
Well, he says meditation is actually a two-part mechanism. First, yes, there is an emptying process.
Okay, so you are emptying something out.
Right, but it's specifically the unlearning of false programming and the ego. But, and this is the key, that space isn't left blank.
So what fills it?
The second part is what fills it, which he calls communing with the divine.
Wow. And communing is just such a richer vocabulary word than just saying talking or communicating.
It really is. It implies this intimate, almost unspoken connection.
Right, like you don't commune with a customer service rep on a phone.
Exactly. You commune with nature or with God or with your deepest self.
I just have to pause and point out the absolute poetry of this moment in the source material.
What do you mean?
Well, think about it. The teacher is literally holding a sleeping baby in his arms while he's teaching the English idiom blank slate.
Oh my gosh, you're right.
Babies are the ultimate physical representation of a blank slate.
That is so true. They have no language yet, no rigid beliefs.
Exactly. No matrix of societal programming that they have to unlearn.
It's beautiful. It visually reinforces the philosophical point he's making without him even planning it.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing.
But you know, it also raises a really crucial question for the listener.
Which is,
If the goal of meditation isn't just to be this empty, blank vessel, what should the mind actually be focusing on?
because an active mind definitely needs a target.
Right. And that perfectly sets up his transition into the Buddhist Noble Eightfold Path.
Ah, yes. Specifically, this really interesting distinction he makes between right mindfulness and wrong mindfulness.
Exactly. So he argues that, right, meditation means anchoring your attention to something intrinsically real and true.
Like what? What counts as real?
Well, your breath is real. The physical sensations in your hands are real.
Okay, that makes sense.
Or, if you are deeply religious, your devotion to God is real. And by focusing on reality, you are insulated.
So you can't be harmed or put in jeopardy by just observing your own heartbeat.
Precisely.
But he makes an observation here that I think is just a massive paradigm shift. Not just for anyone who has tried to meditate, but frankly, anyone who has ever tried to speak a foreign language and just panicked.
Oh, about the distraction.
Yes. He notes that sitting quietly and focusing on your breath does not cause your mind to become distracted.
And this is such a common trap people fall into.
It really is. People sit down, they close their eyes, and their thoughts just start racing a million miles an hour.
And then they immediately conclude, oh, well, meditation makes my brain chaotic. I'm just bad at this.
Right. But the chaos was already there.
Exactly.
He says it's like walking into a filthy, messy room in the pitch dark. And when you finally turn on the lights, you blame the light bulb for the mess.
That is the perfect analogy.
The mess was always there. You just finally slowed down enough to actually see it.
And the teacher contrasts this healthy awareness with wrong meditation.
Okay, so what is wrong meditation?
Wrong mindfulness is when you take that intense concentration and you focus it on something harmful or illusory or negative.
Oh, right. He gives that crazy example.
Yeah, someone sitting quietly in their office, intensely wishing bad things would happen to their boss.
Basically practicing voodoo at their desk.
Cultivating all this destructive energy. I mean, it requires immense focus, sure, but it is fundamentally toxic.
It is the complete opposite of communing.
Exactly.
Okay, so I follow the logic between right and wrong meditation, but I want to play devil's advocate here for a second.
Go for it.
I want to push back on this perfectly peaceful, serene image of right meditation. Because, look, we have all heard the stories about people attending those intense 10-day Vipassana retreats.
Oh, yeah. The silent ones?
Right. They sit in silence for 14 hours a day. And by day 3, their knees are absolutely screaming. Their back is in agonizing physical pain from sitting perfectly still.
Yeah, it sounds brutal.
So my question is fighting through excruciating back pain really what he considers right meditation?
That is a phenomenal pushback. And surprisingly, a viewer actually brings up a really similar concern during the live stream.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
How does he answer it?
His answer completely subverts that whole no pain, no gain spiritual trope. He argues that forcing yourself to fight through agonizing physical pain is the complete opposite of what Buddhists call equanimity.
Ah, okay.
Yeah.
And equanimity is basically mental calmness and balance, right?
Exactly. Think about it. If you are sitting on a cushion, gritting your teeth, sweating, and thinking, I will endure this agony, I will not move, your mind is at war.
You're just fighting yourself.
You are in a state of supreme conflict. You are not communing with anything except your own suffering at that point.
Wow. Man.
And the teacher uses a really grounded analogy for this. He says, you wouldn't wake up tomorrow and try to run a 26-mile marathon if you have never jogged a mile in your life.
No, of course not. You would end up in the hospital.
Exactly. And if you did end up in the hospital, you wouldn't blame the concept of running. You wouldn't say running is inherently torturous.
Right. You would just say, I didn't train.
Yes. So jumping into a 14-hour meditation retreat without months of gradual practice is the mental equivalent of running an untrained marathon.
That makes so much sense.
It's not a shortcut to enlightenment. It's just poor preparation. You have to condition the body to sit naturally and the mind to focus gradually.
So if gritting your teeth through physical pain isn't enlightenment, why do we think gritting our teeth through a boring grammar textbook equals fluency?
Oh, man. You just hit the nail on the head.
Right. It's that exact same flawed, no pain, no gain mentality,
Yeah.
and it is destroying how we learn languages.
It is the exact same underlying error. We somehow assume that if studying doesn't feel like a miserable chore, then it must not be working.
Which perfectly tees up this great question from Tron, a viewer tuning in from Vietnam.
I love Tron's question.
Because Tron asks the ultimate question that every single person listening to us right now has wrestled with at some point. He says, how do I maintain my motivation to learn English?
And the teacher's response to this is just incredibly disruptive.
What does he say?
He says, you don't need motivation.
Which, on the surface, sounds completely absurd.
It really does. Everything in self-help culture tells us we need more motivation, more discipline, more hustle.
But he unpacks the psychology of it brilliantly, doesn't he?
He does. He explains that motivation is actually a finite resource, and you only require it to do things you inherently hate doing.
Okay, I need an example of that.
Well, he uses his own mother as a case study.
Yeah.
He says his mother hates exercise.
Fair enough.
The physical sensation of walking is entirely unpleasant for her. So for her to put on her shoes and walk for just 20 minutes, it requires a massive, exhausting expenditure of willpower and motivation.
Whereas the teacher himself loves to exercise, so he just goes and does it. There is no internal negotiation.
Not at all.
Which leads to one of my absolute favorite concepts from this entire deep dive.
The cookie theory.
Yes. The chocolate chip cookie theory of motivation.
It's so good.
He tells his audience to imagine a plate of warm, freshly baked chocolate chip cookies.
Okay, I'm imagining it.
If you love chocolate chip cookies, do you have to sit there and psych yourself up to eat one?
Definitely not.
Do you need to watch a motivational YouTube video to convince your hand to pick it up?
No, you'd just eat it.
Exactly. He points out that you actually need willpower to stop eating them.
And this highlights the huge difference between extrinsic motivation and intrinsic motivation.
Break that down for me.
Extrinsic motivation is forcing yourself to do something for an external reward, like passing a test. But intrinsic motivation is doing something because the act itself is highly rewarding to you personally.
Okay, I love the cookie analogy. But let me push back a bit again.
All right, I'm ready.
That sounds fantastic for a hobbyist, right? Someone who is just casually watching YouTube videos in English.
Sure.
But what if I am a listener who has to pass an English proficiency exam for my job next month? I can't just casually drink wine and listen to podcasts. Doesn't natural learning break down when you have a strict deadline and high stakes?
It's a really fair concern, but cognitive science actually shows that the teacher's method is more efficient, even under extreme pressure.
Really? How so?
Well, when you rely on textbook drills, which is the mental equivalent of his mother's painful 20-minute walk, your brain's affective filter goes way up. Stress literally blocks absorption.
Right. We talked about the affective filter earlier.
Exactly. But the teacher provides this incredible real-world example of a professional who used the cookie method to accelerate his learning, a viewer named Raphael.
And Raphael is a wine professional living in England, right?
Yes. And Raphael didn't sit around memorizing lists of business English terms.
So what did he do?
He improved his English drastically by consuming high-level podcasts and books about his absolute obsession, wine.
He essentially tricked his brain.
He bypassed the affective filter completely. Because he was so desperate to consume the information about the wine industry, the English language just became the invisible vehicle delivering the knowledge.
Oh, that's brilliant. He just forgot he was studying.
Precisely. And when you forget you are studying, your brain absorbs syntax, vocabulary, and grammar passively, and it does it much faster than if you were actively trying to memorize the rules.
It is all about changing the context.
Totally.
In fact, the teacher mentions that he intentionally designs his own educational content this way to give his students their cookies.
Right. He doesn't spend his broadcast talking about dangling participle.
Oh, the past perfect continuous tense. Thank goodness.
Yeah, nobody wants that. He talks about health, deep philosophy, and practical life skills.
Like that interview he teases with an author known as David the Good.
Yes, an interview all about creating food forests and advanced gardening.
Which is so clever, because if you are an avid gardener, you are going to tune into that interview to learn about soil composition and crop yields.
You aren't tuning in for an English lesson.
No. The English just comes along for the ride.
So, if you are listening to this deep dive right now and you're feeling burnt out on your English learning, you really have to ask yourself, what is your chocolate chip cookie?
Exactly. Are you staring at a grammar workbook feeling completely miserable when you could be watching documentaries about astrophysics or deep sea diving or true crime entirely in English?
Finding that intrinsic passion removes the friction from the learning process entirely.
And this whole idea of removing friction, of allowing for natural, unforced growth, it seems to be the core philosophy governing everything the teacher talks about.
It really does. It applies to far more than just acquiring vocabulary. It dictates how we manage our lives at literally every stage.
Yeah, he interweaves this philosophy into practical advice for multiple generations throughout the broadcast,
Starting fittingly with early childhood.
which is incredibly poignant considering he's delicately balancing a newborn twin on his chest the entire time he's talking about this.
Right. A viewer asks him a question about classroom management and parenting.
And what does he suggest?
He immediately recommends this highly influential book called Tools for Teaching by Fred Jones.
Oh, I've heard of that one.
It's a classic. And the teacher frames the book's methodology perfectly within this idea of a natural, unforced middle path.
He paints a really vivid picture of the two extremes we usually see in parenting or teaching, right? And points out how both are highly unnatural.
Yes, so on one side you have the total absence of structure.
Parents with zero rules, no boundaries.
Right, who end up raising what he bluntly calls brats. Children who just run wild and lack basic respect for others.
And then on the opposite end of the spectrum, you have the extreme overcorrection.
The helicopter parents.
Yes.
Yes.
The parents who hover over their kids constantly, micromanaging every single second of their existence.
Both of these extremes create massive friction.
Because the child with no rules feels unmoored and chaotic.
Exactly. While the micromanaged child feels suffocated and completely loses their intrinsic motivation to explore.
So where does Tools for Teaching fit in?
The teacher explains that the book offers the middle path. It's about establishing clear discipline and instruction, sure, but doing it in a way that builds routines children actually want to follow.
So you design an environment where the child naturally chooses the right action.
Yes.
Wow.
Rather than coercing them through fear or just letting them spiral into chaos, it's guiding growth, not forcing it.
Wow. Just like guiding your mind to your breath in meditation rather than forcing it through painful willpower.
It's all connected.
And this concept of unforced continuous growth doesn't just stop in childhood, does it?
Not at all. It dictates how we age, too. Which brings us to the other end of the human timeline.
Oh, I love this part. The teacher shares a story about his grandmother.
And she is about to hit a massive milestone.
She is about to turn 100 years old.
A full century.
So he asked her what her secret was. Like, how is she still so mentally sharp? How is she physically still going strong after 100 years?
Her answer was just beautifully simple.
She just said, keep moving.
That's it, keep moving.
She didn't say she runs ultramarathons or tortures herself in the gym. She just never stopped naturally moving her body.
In fact, she still teaches an exercise class to other senior citizens.
At 100 years old, that is amazing.
It really is. And that story acts as the keystone for this entire deep dive. It reveals the underlying philosophy tying all these seemingly random topics together.
And what would you call that philosophy?
Natural law.
Okay, walk us through the connections there. How does it all tie back to natural law?
Well, think about the progression of everything we've discussed today.
Okay.
What is right meditation? It is breathing naturally, noticing the reality of the body without forcing it into agonizing physical torture.
Right.
What is the right way to learn a language? It is absorbing it naturally through your deep intrinsic passions, eating the chocolate chip cookies, so to speak, rather than forcing your brain through the mental torture of rote grammar drills.
Yep, completely aligned.
How do you raise a healthy child? You guide them naturally with balanced structure, avoiding the extremes of neglect and suffocating control.
The middle path.
Exactly. And finally, how do you live to be a sharp, capable 100-year-old? You keep moving your body naturally, continuously, every single day.
So what does this all mean for you, the listener? It means that whether you are rocking a newborn baby to sleep, trying to become fluent in a completely new language, or hoping to live a vibrant century, the secret is actively dismantling the rigid, unnatural systems in your life.
It really is about leaning into active, joyful engagement with the world around you.
And that takes a lot of trust, doesn't it?
A profound level of trust, yes. trusting the natural process of your own curiosity rather than trying to clinically engineer every single outcome with sheer willpower.
I think that is just the perfect note to end on. So let's summarize our key takeaways from this incredible high-stakes baby whispering broadcast.
Sounds good.
First, treat language learning like eating your favorite chocolate chip cookie. Stop memorizing lists and find the topics you are deeply passionate about and consume them in English. Let the language be the invisible vehicle for your curiosity.
Spot on.
Second, stop torturing yourself. Whether it is sitting in an agonizing meditation pose when your body isn't ready, or staring at a boring textbook that makes you hate studying. If it feels like torture, you are fighting against natural law.
Yeah, put the textbook down.
Exactly. And finally, never stop moving. Keep your body, your mind, and your passions active.
It's quite a lot of wisdom extracted from a man who's really just trying not to wake up his daughter.
It really is. I mean, he pulled it off.
He definitely did.
Well, to wrap up our time together on this deep dive, I want to leave you with a final provocative question to mull over today.
I love these.
Think about your own daily routine. Look closely at your schedule. If you were to drop all the forced habits in your life today, the things you have to physically drag yourself to do, the things that just drain your willpower, what natural passion could you use as a vehicle to learn something entirely new without ever needing an ounce of motivation?
That is a great question to reflect on. Thank you so much for exploring these ideas with us today.
Yes, thank you for being here. Find your cookie, keep your curiosity alive, and we will catch you on the next deep dive.